And so the other thing is that we are broadcasting this information via Facebook Live, and so it's becoming accessible to a larger community. And so we want to make sure that we are doing this in a way where it just is above board. You know, it's always good to be above board. So first of all, I'm going to start the session off tonight with a trigger warning because we've been talking about mental health. And tonight, actually, the next two series is going to get into something a bit heavy. Tonight, we're going to talk about suicide, suicide awareness and prevention. And then our next session is going to talk about grief and loss. And so I wanted to give a trigger warning tonight because I think it's important that when we talk about these very sensitive topics, they can still be taboo and have stigma around them. One, I want to give trigger warnings so that people know that the topic is going to be sensitive and heavy, so that, again, I always tell you, take care of yourself. If you're sitting here, if you're hearing something, if you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, take care of yourself. And what that might mean, it might mean you need to step out. It might mean, if you find yourself shedding some tears and you need some support and you're open to somebody just coming over and offering you support, whatever it is. Sunday school got for us like that last week. We got into some heavy stuff, and so I've been talking to you guys about that. Mental health is physical health. It's not separate. It's a part of our entire being. And it's really interesting to me that there's still so much stigma around it when the brain is like, who all uses computers in here or has ever used a computer? Well, we know that you got the monitors, right? But the monitors don't run themselves, right? We have, what is it called? A hard drive, Brother Marcus. There's a hard drive, and so that hard drive is where all the programs are stored at. If the hard drive, and Brother Marcus, you can correct me, but if the hard drive becomes corrupted with viruses, it's a negative impact on what's being put out. And they have exactly, it can slow the computer down. It also can corrupt and damage the system to where it's no longer usable. And so the mind is really pretty much, the mind is our hard drive. Like if our mental system is weakened, if it's overwhelmed, if it's overtaxed, if it's flooded, if it's corrupted with viruses, everything about us ceases to work. And that doesn't just mean your physical and emotional health, but that's your spiritual health too. The ability to pray, fast, seek God, connect spiritually, you lose that ability. And I realize now, even just now as I speak, why I'm so passionate about mental health. I think for me growing up, there was just an awareness, although there was an abstract understanding that something was missing. And even when I came into the church, and I will tell you, I experienced powerful deliverance. I remember, actually, what people don't know is, he's preparing the slides, so I'm just talking along a little bit. My salvation experience didn't happen in the church. It happened outside the church, Pop Booker. What it was is my children, their aunt, who had given her life to Christ and had suffered many things, and so I was in a relationship with their brother that was violently abusive. And she ministered to me. I'll never forget it. I was staying with one of his other sisters, and she came into the house. Mind you, she just was amazing to me because I watched this woman. She had several children. She was going through a divorce, and she just seemed to have the ability to cope that amazed me. And she came into the house one day where I was living with her sister. I was sitting, we're ready to go, good. I was sitting on the console, and I had been smoking my 2.5 packs of cigarettes a day because I was stressed out. And she prayed for me. And while she was praying for me, sitting on top of that console, I will never forget it. When she got done praying, my hands was up in the air. I was committing my life to Christ, and I never smoked another Newport again. Now, it doesn't happen for everybody that way, but it did for me that day. I was smoking 2.5 packs of cigarettes, Newports, not Miles, a day. And the people say, you didn't smoke for, no, sweetie, I took the drag. And then come out the nose. You know what I'm saying? I was smoking. It wasn't this puff, little smoke come out your mouth and look cute. Like, I was taking the full drag off the cigarette. Come on, yeah, right? You can roll the cigarette around. You know how they can talk with that cigarette around. Yeah, what you talking about, brother? You know what I'm saying? I could do some of that. Started doing that at about 14 years old. I was smoking them cigarettes. So 2.5 packs a day after being institutionalized already one time. And I was sitting on the console, and all she did was just begin to speak to me in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. And in that house that day, I received the Lord. I probably was about 16 years old, and I didn't know what you know now. I didn't know that I was saved. I mean, I knew I was saved, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I went and did my thing, and before you know it, had another baby and all this other kind of stuff. But what I'm saying is I didn't know, But God had begun a work in me. He had begun a work. But then many years went by, and I got it. Finally, when I really committed to the church, like got involved and, kind of like got up under the mothers, did whatever they told me, threw all my clothes out, threw all my liquor out, put my boyfriend out the house and all that stuff, Got saved for real, Sister Meta. When you put your man out, you say, I was sitting in the pastor's office. He said, you got to get that man up. That's the way, we don't talk about that today, but that's what they used to tell us. I was sitting in the pastor's office, and you know what? This is how I first kind of recognized my experience with the Lord was so powerful, because I was more afraid of being put out the church than I was giving up my man. The pastor, and now we was, I had got saved, so I wasn't doing nothing no more, but I was afraid to put the man out. And so the pastor was like, look, sister, you're going to have to put the man out the house. You got to go. You can't shack and be saved. And I remember going home and thinking, Lord, I don't want to not be able to go to the church. I don't want to not be saved, so I'm going to have to put that brother out. So I'll never forget, I was planning how I was going to put him out. And I'm telling y'all, all I did every day was pray and watch Christian TV. That's when Jan, she had the big, hair. Jan and Paul Crouch, y'all probably don't know nothing about that. I watched the good old Christian TV, the Gaither brothers. I went all the way to the other side. And so I would be praying. One time I was praying so hard in the house, y'all, I was on my knees praying. I used to live in this house right behind Big John Steak and Onion. It's closed now. The house is tore down. I was praying so hard, and the house was so raggedy, Mother. When we would have a storm, a back door would blow open, and we had a little pit bull. He would run away. So one day I was in the house just praying, and the wind was blowing, and the door was shaking. Boom! I heard the door shake, and I'm just down on my knees, just calling on the name of the Lord. And because we lived behind the restaurant, it was mice. So I was praying so hard, I felt the mice ran up my skirt, up my back, Brother Marcus, and ran back down. I didn't stop praying. What's that song say? Take me back, dear Lord, because I don't pray like that now, y'all. But I was praying for my dear life. I was praying so the mouse ran up my back and ran back down. I just kept on praying. Because I needed I needed the courage to put that man out. So this was Stacy, this is what I did. Because he was 6'3". Ooh-wee. Girl, and he could whoop the black off a crayon. So But I was sitting one day studying, read my Bible, and I read the scripture that says, be more afraid of the one who could kill the body and the soul than the one who could kill the body. That's why I tell the people, you can't play with me. I know the word of God. I might not act like it today, but I do. So I read that scripture, and I got afraid, Sister Meta. I said, ooh, I got to tell him he got to go today. So I went in the room, and Deacon Allen, I packed this little garbage bag up. I said, you getting out tonight. So he was gone. So he come in the house, and he said, it feels different in here. So I stood up bold. I hadn't stood up this bold ever, Brother Marcus. I stood up. I said, I've been praying. And the pastor, you know, we used to say the pastor said, you can't be here no more. You know, we here behind the pastor back in the day. I said, so you got to go because I'm saved. Now, I had tried it once before on him, and, you know, he had attacked me. So I was scared. I said, you got to go. So he looked at me and gave me that look. Sister Nikki. He just stared me down. Holy Ghost gave me the strength, staring right back. I looked up at him. I said, you got to go. It's your stuff. You got to go. Before I know it, Mother Booker, he grabbed me, lifted me up, and was choking me by my throat. I couldn't breathe hardly. And all I could get out, Mother, was, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He dropped me like his hand caught fire and ran out the door. Never saw him again, at least not in that capacity, till he came and picked his bag up, Sister Metter. So I said all that to say, even with all these things that we got going on today, I have experienced and witnessed, I know what deliverance is like, right? You know, because I think that what makes it challenging today, people want to stay away from mental health because they think that it somehow waters down God or the gospel or prayer or spiritual practices. But I want to say it doesn't do that at all. Because while I've seen so many victories in my life through prayer, I still spent many years struggling mentally. I still spent many years struggling mentally. And there were times, even after I was in a healthy relationship with a loving man helping me raise my children, still having life struggles, he had no idea at this point early on in our marriage that sometimes I fantasized about hanging myself in the closet. He never knew that there were times when I woke up and I didn't want to live. You know, it still took a while. And sometimes when I would go off into my shell and be to myself, or my mood would dramatically change, or for a long time, Andre was just like, I don't know. I just love her, and we're going to see what it's going to be. But it was rough. And so I said all that to say, coming to this lesson, that we're going to be talking about suicide. Once you come into this information, you may see some things differently around you that you didn't pay attention before. I'm a firm believer that you can't come to know a thing and not somehow need or may have to use it. God does not allow us to come into information that we don't have to use. And so tonight I kind of vacillated about presenting this lesson in particular because I want to say very carefully in this space, I know that this church has experienced suicide. And I've been here for 10 years. And I know it hasn't been talked about, not in the way that we're going to talk about it today. I know that the person was loved by the people here, well known. And while you might have some kind of historical background, I know the feeling of not kind of seeing it coming and what it may have done to you, whether you realized it or not. So with that in mind, I'm taking this subject on with empathy, with caution, and with compassion for you tonight. Again, we create a safe space. We're supportive in this space. We're aware in this space. We're flexible and we're engaged in this space. But what I want you to do here tonight is I'm praying that tonight you will feel safe enough to have some expression, some interaction, particularly because in this house we have experienced this, and that what you learn tonight may be healing for you. Is it okay if I say that? So go ahead and get my slides going. And of course, y'all know, so I'm a singer, and I like songs, and I like music. So I entitled this presentation, When Doves Cry. And I know some of y'all might know that song by Prince. I tell people I think in song speak. And so advance my slide. Let's talk about it. Suicide. So there's a few definitions here. As a noun, Merriam-Webster defines suicide as the act or instance of taking one's own life voluntarily and intentionally, especially by a person, listen to this definition, by a person of years of discretion and of a sound mind. Believe it or not, a lot of people who commit suicide, they're not unsound. Oxford Dictionary says the action of killing oneself intentionally. Dictionary.com says the intentional taking of one's own life. Go ahead and advance that slide. So let's talk about what happens. Every 2 hours and 11 minutes, a person under the age of 25 dies by suicide. That's 10 people every day. Suicide is the third leading cause of deaths for youth aged 10 to 24, resulting in 4,600 deaths a year. 1 in 7 high school students have considered suicide within the past school year. 1 in 14 high school students attempted suicide within the past school year. 90% of people who die by suicide have a diagnosable and treatable psychiatric disorder at the time of their death. Mind-boggling. I went to Texas last year, or was it earlier this year? I went to Texas and I went to church with Justin. And while I was there, they had announced to pray for a family because a 12-year-old child had taken their life. Advance the slides. I know this is heavy, y'all. We gonna plow through it, though. So, 10th leading cause of death in the United States, suicide. Second leading cause of death in the United States among 15 to 24-year-olds. There is one death by suicide in the U.S. every 12 minutes. Every day, approximately 105 Americans die by suicide. Depression affects 20 to 25% of Americans ages 18 in a given year. Suicide takes the lives of over 38,000 Americans every year. So you've heard me. I started off my presentations this week, through these series, with stress. We went to trauma. Now we're talking about suicide. So this is kind of where we can end up, with unrelenting toxic stress that we don't address, and then having traumatic experiences. This is where we can end up. Advance the slide. So how do you beat stress? Now, I put this slide in here particularly because we've been talking. June was Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I found this interesting from the Men's Health Forum from 2016. It says men are only 38% of the NHS talking therapy referrals, saying that only about 38% of men are referred into therapy, yet 78% of deaths by suicide are male. And what I have been challenging you all as men to do, to take up the mantle to create safe space, but also realizing that with that high percentage of men experiencing death by suicide, it's really important for men to begin conversations and discussions about mental health. You know, you go ahead and advance my slide. So here's something that might shock you. I work in maternal infant health and perinatal mental health. That's really kind of my wheelhouse. And so this slide was important for me to put in because this pertains to women who are pregnant. Research suggests suicide is the leading cause of maternal death in the first year following childbirth. So the leading cause of maternal death, which is basically saying death related to pregnancy or pregnancy-related death, the leading cause, the number one cause is suicide. Now, guess what the number one cause is among black women? Anybody want to guess what the number one cause of maternal death is among black women? Cardiovascular disease. So it's astounding. Maternal suicide is most frequently completed between 6 to 12 months postpartum. So 6 to 12 months after the baby is had, that's when these suicides can be completed. Maternal suicide deaths are more common than maternal deaths caused by postpartum hemorrhage or hypertensive disorders. The severity and rapidly evolving nature of postpartum psychosis increases the risk of maternal suicide. And postpartum psychosis is another condition where in maternal effects, people can experience psychosis. Suicide accounts for up to 20% of maternal deaths that occur in the postpartum period. And then depression during pregnancy greatly increases thoughts about suicide while pregnant. So again, all these different hormonal shifts that are happening in pregnancy, the body changing, along with whatever types of stressors are happening in the pregnancy, this all contributes to suicide for women who are birthing or birthing persons. Advance the slide. Is that shocking to anybody? Yeah. It's shocking to you, Brother Charles? Share with me what makes it shocking to you, if you don't mind. It's tough for you to wrap your head around. So what he's saying is that just grappling with the idea that someone is struggling to the degree that they desire to end their life. That's a tough thing to grapple with. I wish we had another mic too, because again, we're broadcasting. Can we? Yeah, for questions. Is there a way we can get another mic? I'll restate the question until you get it ready. Sister Matter. Absolutely. So Sister Matter, she talked about having this baby, entertaining, going to college. So a lot of changes are happening, right? Not only are changes happening in your body and your experience, but changes is happening in your projected future. Changes are happening in your projected future. And so with all of those things happening, it can lead to a very deep sense of hope, frustration, anger, hopelessness. And so I can hear with an open heart, Brother Charles, you talking about grappling with the idea that this would be something for somebody. But also on the other side of it, and I'm glad that your wife spoke to it, presenting, right, the depth of pain that people are going through when they are going through these different changes in their lives and how they feel about it. and how overwhelming it is, right? Because sometimes it's happening, there's more than one thing happening all at once. And think about it in a way where like, it's like somebody dumping out a garbage can, right? And then now they're not only dumping out the garbage can, but they're backing up the garbage truck, Brother Marcus. You know what I'm saying? So it's dumping and dumping and dumping. And that's kind of what can happen when people fall into hopelessness, right? It's a lot of times it's not one isolated incident, but because it's not always something we can see, and of course we can't feel into the other person's experience, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to see into. So look at this. Here's my next slide, understanding Black youth suicide. You know, it used to be a thing in our communities where we kind of bragged that like a suicide wasn't our thing. And I will tell you that statistics still show that 7 out of 10 suicides are committed by white males. But I also want you to know that suicide is increasing. And while the statistics show that men commit suicide more often, they complete the act, women have suicidal thoughts more. So, I mean, the statistics are bearing this out. So, understanding Black youth suicide. So, let's take a look at this. The rate of suicide in Black youth 13 years old is approximately 2 times higher than their white peers. 2008, suicide, 5th leading cause of death in Black youth, 5 to 18 years old. 5 to 18 years old. Do you know that there's a such thing as pediatric suicide? These are things that we may not know. 2018, suicide is 3rd leading cause of death among Black youth 5 to 18 years old. And then 2009 to 2019, this is a 10-year span, the percentage of Black high school students who consider suicide increased from 12.95 to 16.89. Made a suicide plan. So it went from you know, those who were considering suicide to those who actually like, I got a plan, I'm gonna take pills, I'm gonna use a gun, I'm gonna hang myself. It increased from 9.79 to 15.02. And then that actually attempted the suicide increased from 7.9 to 11.85%. So again, these suicide rates are increasing. Let's advance the next slide. And if you have questions, you have thoughts. So these are some of the most common methods. So what's the most common method looking at my slide? Gun. Why do you think that is? Quick and easy. Who do you think is most likely to use a gun and committing suicide? Males. Males. Males, statistics show that males are most likely to commit suicide using guns. And you're absolutely right, Brother Marcus, and those of you that answer, it's quick and easy. That's if you get the shot off where you want to get it off at, you know. I mean, you know, it is. And then 25%, really, this is such an archaic thing to me, but 25% people still use hanging. They still use hanging. And so it's terrible if you survive it. I hate to say it that way, but, you know, sometimes people injure themselves to the point that what they intended doesn't happen, and now they have to be cared for. And then, of course, toxins, which can include taking drugs or taking pills or ingesting poison. And then other methods like people dropping off bridges, cutting. And, of course, people do still, you know, try to run themselves off the road and stuff like that. Go ahead and advance that slide. So here are some facts. And I got to get my glasses for this slide because the writing is a little small. So here are some facts. So, say, worry about suicide. Are you concerned that someone you know may be at risk for suicide? Your first step in helping may be as simple as learning the facts or warning signs. The following signs may mean that a youth is at risk, or anybody else, for suicide, particularly if that person attempted suicide in the past. So they have this mnemonic or this acronym called FACTS to help you deal with somebody, identify somebody, or support somebody who might be considering suicide. Facts. The first one is the letter F, feelings. If you notice that somebody is expressing feelings of hopelessness, if they are, or about the future, just like they just can't see past, they can't see past today. And a lot of times, deep, heavy pain does that. When you're in deep, heavy pain, it's not about what's going on down the road. It's about what's happening right now. Okay? The A, in facts, actions. What kind of actions are they displaying? Right? And those actions, are they overwhelming or pain or distress? And then C in the word facts, changes. What have you noticed? Are they showing worrisome behavior or cues, marked changes in their behavior, including withdrawal from friends, changes in social activities, anger, hostility, changes in sleep? Sleep is a big one. A lot of times people don't realize how sleep and depression are closely linked. When people struggle with depression, they can either sleep too much or sleep too little. Being sleep deprived actually affects the brain in the way that it causes your processing to slow down. Also, not getting adequate sleep affects your brain in a way where you lose the ability to have that fine-tuned judgment that you would have when you're rested. So people don't realize when you start to become overwhelmed and fatigued and you notice you're not sleeping very much or you're sleeping all the time, this could be a sign that you're struggling with depression. And at those times is when you're most vulnerable. What we have to realize too, that when people are plagued by suicide, it's not that they're, how do I want to say it, inherently wrong. It's something that's happening in their brain that's causing things to change. So sometimes when this person is at the place where they want to take their life, the person you know them as, that's not where they are, right? That's not where they are. They're in a whole nother space now, okay? Threats, are they talking about it? Are they writing about it? Are they making jokes about it? Are they be like, it would just be so much better if I wasn't around. I wonder if y'all gonna miss me when I'm gone. I wonder what y'all would do if I wasn't here anymore. Different comments, things like that we can hush off or tell people, stop saying that. But it could be an indicator. It could be a clue that we need to take a second look. And then situations, experiencing stressful situations, including those that involve loss. Hear me clearly. Situations, experiencing stressful situations, including those that involve loss, change, create personal humiliation, or involve getting into trouble at home, in school, or with the law. These kinds of situations can serve as triggers for suicide. And if you notice these warning signs, you can help. You can express concern. Here's something that I didn't know until I got trained in suicide as a mental health first aider, is that when people are struggling with suicide, asking them directly is not the thing that makes them think about suicide. Most times if a person is contemplating suicide, they're already there. Asking a person if they're contemplating suicide can be helpful, not unhelpful. And we're going to go further in the slides to show you that. So here's some suicide warnings, right? Some warning signs. And so you see making the threats, substance abuse, making funeral arrangements. This was something that I was engaging in a few years ago. I was planning my funeral. Nobody knew it. I was sitting in church in 2012. 2012. I was sitting in church, and I was contemplating how I was going to plan my funeral, and what I would want and what everybody should do. And I was sitting there, and they brought a prophet. Was it Prophet Eccles? It was Prophet Eccles. Prophet Eccles came to our church. I was sitting. I wouldn't want to sit in the front, but somehow I got in the front. They had brought Prophet Eccles in. He was up speaking. I was sitting there. Prophet Eccles came down. He said, "You should live and not die." Nobody knew. My husband, nobody knew I was planning my funeral. He said, "Woman of God, you should live and not die." And he started praying for me. Nobody knew that I was sitting there contemplating my funeral. I will never forget that. He prophesied twice in my life, once in that church and once in this church. He said, what I'm doing now, he prophesied about it. He's not here today. I think he's passed away. Yeah. He prophesied that I will be doing this. He said, you're going to be the kind of person that get down in the dirt with people where they are. I remember he said that in this church. Yeah. But I was contemplating planning my funeral, and thank God I didn't get away with it. So these are just some things to notice. You can advance the slide. And some warning signs. Again, we kind of been talking about that already. You know, people wanting to die, having guilt and shame, being a burden. This is another thing, too, with suicide. A lot of times people can feel like a burden to others. This is where we see the suicide rate increasing with our elderly people. So we have suicide rate that's pretty high with our teenagers, and then it goes up with our older people. And one of the reasons it does that is because the burden, right? They don't want to feel like a burden, losing your independence, losing your vitality, your virility, losing your ability to take care of yourself and having to be, you know, all of those kind of things. The suicide rates go up. And that's where you hear about the assisted suicide, or sometimes people ask their kids to give them, you know, different things happen. It's very real. And what's happening, and this is what's happening, Brother Charles, like you said, it's like, how do people get in that space? But the feeling that the person is having is empty, hopeless, trapped, having no reason to live, feeling extremely sad, agitated, full of rage, unbearable emotional or physical pain. This person, they're carrying a pain that you can't see, but on them, it's like a Mack truck sitting on their back. So it's not a casual thing like, oh, I just don't want to live anymore. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be responsible for life anymore. This pain is so deep that I cannot imagine why in the world should I keep living? I have no reason to be alive, right? And so this is where we see, sister, go ahead. Go ahead. That's a great question, Sister Stacy. And I want to answer that question in this way. There is no way, me being a human being, I could ever understand what you might be thinking. What I can say is this. Some of what you are describing, we will see in these slides. People having a preoccupation with death, planning their funeral, going through a traumatic event, all of those things can definitely be characteristic. But to say, for me to say or to imply, one is totally out of my scope. And two is to say, I could not say that that's the experience you are having. One of the reasons I couldn't say it is because and I want to applaud you for being so courageous and brave in this space. And I want to be very delicate in that I want to honor your experience. And I don't want to name and identify your experience. But I do appreciate you being here and asking that question because it brings up something very real. I will say this too, I'm unsure if you're working with a grief professional, but if you are, I would strongly encourage you to have that conversation with that professional. Am I being clear about what I'm saying? I don't want to label or tell you what experience you're having because I am not a therapist, and it would be out of line for me to do that in front of these people. But I do want to say that some of the things that you have identified, they will come up in these slides. People who have experienced those types of things. But I also, with the great knowledge that I do have about mental health, I want to say that if those are concerns that you are having, or if there's something that resonates for you in that way and you have a grief professional, I would encourage you to schedule a time and sit down with that person and have that discussion. Because here's what happens when we're in pain. Pain can thrive in secrecy. It can thrive in secrecy because shame is there, guilt is there, and a lot of different emotions are there. But when we bring it up and out, we can shape and we can have some autonomy with our pain when we bring it up and out. So that's why I'm applauding you for doing this in this space. But what I don't want to do is step outside of my scope and my realm, because that's a disservice and that would harm you. And anybody, one of the things they teach us in this work is to not recreate harm. So there is no way I or anybody else should tell you what you're thinking or feeling. But if this does resonate with you in that way, I definitely want to encourage you to seek support from a licensed, qualified professional. Does that sound all right? Thank you for asking that. Thank you for lifting that in this room. It takes a lot of courage. Everybody wouldn't lift that question in here. Absolutely. And you know what? You're absolutely right. You went there, and that was the next space that I was going to, is that, but no, it's good that you raised that. It's not that those things are abnormal. One of the things I'm doing with Sister Stacy's question, though, especially coming off Sunday, is with the context that we have under it, I want to make sure that I stay within scope and support where she is in her experience. But you're absolutely right. It's not uncommon. I have had many opportunities where loss has made me think, man, I want to get stuff in order. So I definitely don't want, again, I answered your question in the way that I did for specific purposes, but I also don't want you to leave with the thought that, oh, I must be contemplating suicide because I'm getting, because it's wise to do that. That's why I wanted to say to you, nobody, and I said it for myself, but also for anybody else that might be sitting here, and for you to know when you walk out these doors, nobody is supposed to tell you what you're thinking and feeling. Only you can be clear about that. But as we go through this education, it's going to bring up questions, and that's what's good, because we need to be provoked into these thoughts so that we can say, what do I do with this when this comes up for me? I know sometimes when things come up for me, I'll go to my therapist and say, I didn't think that this was resonate with me, but it's on my mind, and I'll talk to her about it because I want to know, like, where I am with it. And it's okay to shoot stuff off of people so you can kind of see where you are, because it's better, it's healthy, and it's helpful. So absolutely, that both of those perspectives go well together. Can we go to the next slide? So there's some myths, and I thought this was super important. I'm going to go up here so I can see this slide a little better. There are some myths. Is it okay? Am I still within camera range? Okay. So these are some myths and facts about suicide. So let's talk about these myths. One of the myths is people usually commit suicide without warning. Here's the fact, though. There's a stigma around mental health, and people often hide it to avoid being shamed about it. At other times, friends or families may not recognize the warning signs. So the thing is that it's not uncommon that people who are contemplating suicide, that there is something that has happened, been done or said, but we just may not know what it looks like. And so, because sometimes people, you know, they giving everybody gifts and they being all super friendly. Here's the thing. What do you know about this person when you're interacting with them? One of the key things in suicide awareness is attention to detail. What am I looking at? If this person is typically a person, say Deacon Allen is a person that's typically frugal and holds on to every dollar, but all of a sudden he started writing $1,000 checks, we might need to check on him. You know what I'm saying? If you don't mind me using that example, he said you should better. Yeah, you know, if he usually a person, you know, that can pop the face off a penny, but now he giving you everything he got, you might want to check and see if he okay. You know, and so things like that. Talking about a myth, talking about suicide increases the chance that someone goes through with it. Here's the fact. Talking about suicide can give a person permission to tell you how they feel, and together you can help them identify how to get support. Another myth, talking about suicide might give someone the idea to try it. Here's what we know. People with suicide often feel alone and hopeless. Talking about suicide might help them find a different point of view to their current situation. Asking someone who is in emotional distress if they are thinking about suicide can help. Don't be afraid of the conversation. Here's another myth. People attempt suicide are attention seekers. This is a myth that I really despise. People who attempt suicide are attention seekers. Having suicidal thoughts and attempting suicide, here's the facts. Having suicidal thoughts and attempting suicide are usually a sign that someone needs help. People who die from suicide usually mention that they don't see a future or that they are thinking of ending their lives. It is important to be kind and sensitive to someone who has suicidal thoughts or is showing the suicide warning sign. And then the last myth, having suicidal thoughts is shameful and it needs to be kept a secret. If a friend or loved one shares with you that they are having suicidal thoughts, do not try to handle the situation alone. Instead, get help from a trained mental health professional. And that's what I was saying. You know, we have to be careful. You know, we've come up, especially from the church's perspective, everything has been about good or bad, God or the devil. We haven't had a lot of space to honor our mental health and its capacity and our struggles and what we're going through. So oftentimes when we talk about things that are taboo or stuff that people just haven't talked about openly before, it makes people uncomfortable. And hear me clearly, we are all human. It is perfectly okay. Our knee-jerk reaction is to want to do something to make it better. But sometimes that thing that we want to do may not be the thing to do. That's why this education and further training is necessary, so that if a person is in this situation and you encounter them, you don't feel powerless. Like Elder McGee talked about the woman and having this thing happen with her and not having the equipment to do CPR. Actually, being aware and trained to deal with suicide is the same as knowing how to do CPR. It's about knowing how to meet people where they are in a crisis. That's what it's about, okay? Advance the slide.
In my profession, people call 911 daily because somebody had said something to let them know that they were contemplating suicide. And we do, like the police come, they do a welfare check, but then we do a petition to get them lodged into the hospital. And they may be there for several hours, they may be there for a day or two or longer, depending on the situation. And we have to tell people, it's okay that you called.
Yeah.
I mean, we would rather help somebody than not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just know if something ever came up and somebody made a statement and you didn't know how to handle it, but you thought that it was a suicidal statement, you can always call 911.
Absolutely. 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 Did anybody else have a question or a comment they wanted to make in there? I know this is a little tough. I only got a few more slides, but let's just take a little break right here, right? We just gonna take a little break and take a nice deep breath. What we're gonna do is just take a nice deep inhale in, and then we're just gonna kind of hiss it out. Yeah, okay. So let's just take just kind of a little bit of shake your shoulders a little bit, because this is a tough subject. It's tough. It's kind of triggering a little bit. Yeah, just kind of feel into your body. I'll stop right here, too, and ask anybody if they're willing to share. How is this feeling to you? If anybody's willing to share, how is this conversation feeling to you right now? Sister Matter. Heartbreak. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Brother Marcus, you share with
I'll just say it's after listening to you going through the slides and everything, it bring me back to I won't say the name for purposes, but my god brother. I'll just say that there were certain characteristics that what I was told that was being displayed that they were displaying to their sister the previous day or hours or whatever before that happened. They will say, well, I love you, but it was a way that they kept saying that as they was walking in the park or something together and stuff like that. So it's the things you say about like unusual behaviors, and then I didn't, and when you're going through this here, that kind of brings you back to that thought, the unusual characteristics that a person might display that's not normal for what they currently or previously was doing. Like say a couple years from then, back or something.
Sometimes it's, hindsight is 2015. Hindsight is 2015. Sometimes what we see once something has went on versus what's happening, it's very tough to see something when we're in it. And so the processing that goes on can be tough. And this is why it's really important when we experience a great point that Detective Metter made, and I call her that in reference to this on this training, because she deals with this in that capacity. It's very important for support to be available to everybody that's affected. I'm sure and the work that you do, they have some type of support set up for you to meet you where you are as a worker, because that's another thing that people don't realize. Suicide rates are high among police officers, firefighters, police. Suicide actually rates are high amongst people who work in high demand fields. Yep, pastors, the suicide rate. Really, people who work in high demand fields, and especially that do work with people and social service type work, suicide rates are high. And these are some of the things of why they are. Can we bring those slides back up? I just got a few more slides to go through. So this is another myth and facts. All suicidal people are fully intent on dying. Nothing can be done about it. Untrue. Fact, 95% are undecided about it. They call for help or before or after the attempt. Believe it or not, people want help. People do want help. Sometimes they just don't know about how to get it. Suicide is impulsive. Most suicides are carefully planned and thought about for weeks. Once a person decides to take their life, believe it or not, it is something suicide is not a rash act. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna blow my brains out. That's not what happens. people are in a contemplative state to bring themselves to this point of suicide. And oftentimes, people will take substances, to get themselves in that space to commit the act against themselves. So it's not an easy thing. And then another myth, suicidal people remain suicidal. Actually, that's untrue. And I enjoy what you said earlier about what you were going through when you had your son and stuff like that. Like you mentioned having support from somebody. One of the key ways for us to be there with people through what they're going through and for them to come through it, not get over it, but come through it, is support. Having support matters. And so it says, most are suicidal for only a brief period. Timely intervention may save their lives. And studies are starting to show that if people come back from suicide, typically they'll never think about doing it again. So advance that slide for me. So here's some do's and don'ts. I wanted to get to this because this is so important. What do we do if we realize, oh, somebody's in trouble, and what don't we do? So do's and don'ts. Do, and Sister Meta just said it, call 911 if the person is in immediate physical danger or if you're in danger, because sometimes that's how we get, a double whammy there. And then it says, be patient and talk openly and honestly. Remove any guns, knives, stockpile pills. Calmly ask and simple, direct question like, can I help you? Call a psychiatrist. Now, I'm not a fan of that point right there. And I'll tell you why. Because a person might be in such a delicate state, and this is opinion only. I think that there's something you can ask, but I don't know. I think that for me, I would be, can we call somebody for help together? Versus saying, can we call a psychiatrist? What if the person don't go to psychiatrist? What if they don't believe psychiatrist? What if you trying to call me crazy? It's something about that potentially, Sister Stacy taking it. It's triggering, yeah. I'm thinking from a mental health perspective, I would say if you're gonna say something, say, can I call somebody to help you? Can we get on the phone and talk to somebody? I think I would say that versus can we call a psychiatrist? And then express support and concern. Here's some things you don't do. Don't argue and threaten and raise your voice. Don't do that. Don't minimize the problem. And we do that sometimes. Minimizing is that thing where we tell, well, you shouldn't even be feeling like that. I mean, your life is good and da-da-da-da. That's not helpful, okay? Don't debate whether suicide is right or wrong. And this is great for us as a body of believers, right? This is not a time for us to debate our beliefs. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just saying that this is not a time. You got to remember, this person believes that they are trapped, that they are hopeless, that there's no help for them. The last thing you want to do is already give them something that you believe, and maybe once they did believe it, but right now they don't. They don't believe nothing that got to do with life. So this whole thing of, you going to go to hell, or God going to be mad at you, or you being selfish, it's okay. I mean, in times like these, when you're dealing with people that are in crisis and it's uncomfortable for you, if you got any sense, you got to manage your feelings so that you can support them. And Sister Meta know what I'm talking about as a police officer, because you guys are considered frontline workers automatically. It ain't a job you ain't signed up for, but that's a part of what you are. And a part of your training is you got to manage your environment. You got to watch yourself, watch what you do, pay attention. You know what I'm saying? You can't be all over the place with a bunch of stuff. That this moment is about them. It's not about you. So that whole thing, you being selfish and all of that, no, they going off the bridge. They over, sir. They're over. They're going over the ledge. Don't do it. And then if you're nervous, again, do what you can to manage yourself. And that's why it's important for us to learn calming techniques. And sometimes, here's the thing, and we learn this in church and in other spaces. You got to get ready before you're ready. So practicing how to take care of people in crisis is something you got to practice before you get there. You can't wait to get there, right? Brother Charles, you're a firefighter. Tell us some of the things that you do to prepare for a fire. Can you get him the mic? I mean, you know, I'm not saying you got to be super graphic, but just tell me what do you, right, before you learn how to fight a fire, what do you do to get ready to fight a fire?
Mentally, I would pray. That's just me. And I know everybody's not in that same section, but mentally, I would pray because I know where my help comes from.
Yeah.
I know what I'm about to do. I try not to run off on this cowboy mentality. I'm the type of person, I love helping people, and I will do whatever I can do to help you and save you. At the same time, you have to use common sense and realize you're human. So, you know, running in there without your gear on ain't gonna do no good. Take your time, get your gear on. You got a better chance of saving them and keeping yourself. But the main thing for me is praying.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, here's what I love about what he said. We're going to take the prayer for giving because we all here in church. But here's what I love what he said from a practical standpoint. He says, I love saving people, but I got to put my gear on first. Because guess what? If he don't got the gear on, the smoke it alone is going to take him out, right? Before you can get to the flames, the smoke going to take you out. You got to be geared up, and that's what this education and this training and this awareness is about. It's about being geared up. Let's go to the next slide. I think I'm almost at the end of the slides. Other do's and don'ts. Let the person talk and listen to them without judgment. Don't try to minimize or shame the person into changing their mind. Do reassure them that treatment and help is available. Don't try to convince a person who is suicidal that it's not that bad. Because remember, right now for them, it is. Do tell them what they are experiencing is treatable and that suicidal feelings are temporary. Don't preach about suicide being wrong. Advance the slide. And then here, these are 5 action steps for helping someone in emotional pain. Ask the question directly. Are you thinking about killing yourself, or are you thinking about taking your life? And you might say, Sister Lisa, really? I got to ask somebody that? Yes, you do. And you might say that sounds easy for you. Actually, it's not. I just had to walk somebody through this a couple months ago. And it was a loved one. And they are in another state. And the thing that happened to them was devastating. And they work in a high threshold field. So I'm on the phone with this person that I can't see, I can't touch, and they crying. And I have to be a disruptor and say, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about taking your life? And of course, they say, actually, I am. I got XYZ here. And again, because of the profession, they got weapons, they got it all. They got it all. I'm not there. And they got all they need to do it. And so I'm on the phone, right? And so it says, keep them safe. How am I keeping them safe when they thousands of miles away? So one, I started talking to them. Well, I started listening to them. And I say, share with me what's going on. And gently affirming, that sounds painful. And I'm walking through them with it. Who can we call to help? Can we call somebody to come there and be there with you? Can we call, ask for permission? And so I'm talking to the person, and I'm on the phone for a couple of hours talking them through this. And asking to call the night, and so we get on the phone. So we got to keep them safe. Listen carefully, acknowledge their feelings. That's what I'm doing. I'm like, you know what, this is rough. Oh, this is painful. I'm just affirming. I'm not trying to add nothing. You know, I'm not trying to, that's a mess. You know, I'm like, this is rough. This is tough. I'm just kind of gently affirming that their experience is hard and what they're dealing with. and then be there. So I'm there in the moment, I'm with them, and it's to help them connect. And so this number that's up here now is the previous Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. They have condensed the number down to 3 numbers, 988, which thank you, Lord, because who has the time if somebody is thinking about suicide to dial all the numbers? So I say, let's dial the 988 number. And we get just in the space where the person is like, okay. And we get connected to the 988 number. And then I got to get off the phone because I got to just trust that I've done everything I could do. And I check back in. But once they with the 988, these people they trained. They know what to do. They know what to say. This is their job. So they're doing their thing. And I wait to check in, and a friend, we called a friend went over and spent the night. You know, we just did what we could. And so you can do something and then stay connected. I followed up. I called a few hours later just to see, like, what's happening? What's going on? Tell me what's happening with you right now. 988 is the National Suicide Prevention number.
988
So,
is the national
so
number?
yes, Sister Metter, she mentioned a 911 number, and you can call that, and people do. But when you're working with somebody directly in crisis, too, you can call the 988 number. So you're working with the person, and they talk about suicide. You're affirming how they feel gently. You're listening to them. You're holding space. You're doing your thing. And then you get in a space where you say, you know what, can we call somebody? Can we call somebody to help? Can we just call somebody maybe that can talk with us and see what we can do next? You know, and definitely you want to ask consent, but you just don't want to be pushy and forceful. You want them, and here's what's powerful about what you're doing with them. They still, by getting their consent, by gently walking with them through it, they're giving their permission. They're using their autonomy to make this decision. You're not making it for them. Advance to the last slide. I think this is the last slide. 988. So that's a suicide prevention number. So we can call this number. It's a short number. You get connected to people who are trained, and they're there. So, you know, for me, when I'm working with somebody in this space, I'll be honest, like this is the line I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to this. Unless it's a situation where I have to call 911 because this person is going to hurt themselves and others, then we got to call 911. We got to do whatever we got to do. We want the person to feel safe, but if they are a danger to themselves and others, we got to call the police. Because now we you know what I'm saying, we're not trying to put them or us at risk, right? So that's the end of that presentation. Of course, this one probably didn't appear or feel as engaging because it was heavier, and I knew that. I knew it would be heavy, but we can't cover mental health without covering this, and it's important to cover this in the church because you know, we have to expand the way that we think. We can keep praying, we can keep fasting, we can keep supporting. I'm not saying we can't keep doing our spiritual practices, but we need evidence-based information about how to address these issues so that we're able to support people in a way where we can save a life. You can save a life. You don't got to be a superhero, right? But you can go in with your garments on, prepared, and there to support somebody, and you get them to who can help them so they can get what they need, okay? So that completes this part of the presentation. Did anybody, thank you, take care, Sister Stacy. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, I appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions, any comments that they want to say before we wrap this up?
She was in the kitchen, and she said the devil told her to kill herself. I didn't find that out until later down the road, and I was devastated to the point that I went into the room and slammed the door because I was like, Lord, why am I here? if she don't talk to me. This is from a husband point of view. I love this woman. I don't want her to die. Why is the devil talking to my wife? I know he can do it. But still, I was devastated as her husband. So I'm in there feeling like, I don't know what to do, God. What do I do? This is my wife, and this one was kind of tough. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. And this still is a tough topic for him, but he probably doesn't remember what he started doing. Do you remember what you started doing for me, though? Tell him what you started doing for me.
I started, number one, I started paying attention more, and I also started talking to her more, and I also started to learn more about suicide.
He did. But here's something that he did that he's probably not thinking about right now. Andre would come in the house and he would lay his hands on my head and he would pray. And he used to say this. I don't even know if you remember. He used to say, Father, I pray for a covenant mind. And so now, because we have such open discussions about what I went through, he's very keen to watch when something's off with me. And you know what? Whether we're talking about suicide or not, I would encourage you, as whether you're couples, whether you're parents, whether you know friends, pay attention to your person. You know, sometimes we have a way when we're carrying a load or got things on our mind and we pressed down in life, we just kind of walk around and we kind of carry it on our own and we don't want people to know. But pay attention to your person. Don't wait for them to tell you if they're okay or not. Look at your like when you in the house, Charles, and you notice, you know, you study your person and just be like, pay attention so close to where you almost be like, babe, you okay? Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. 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 But you see stuff. Yeah. So here's a question I will ask you guys before we close out. 5 more minutes, Pastor, if you don't mind. What kind of self-care do you think would be purposeful to practice? Or you notice your person is overwhelmed. What kind of self-care? Hear what I'm saying? What kind of self-care would you practice? What would you offer up? Anybody want to take that? What kind of self-care would you offer up when you're dealing with overwhelm, when you're dealing with stress, when you're dealing with these kind of things to prevent that hopeless feeling, that isolated, I feel alone feeling? Anybody? Or do I need to just go around the room? Just period. What kind of care practice would you use? And hear me clearly. I want to challenge y'all. Can I say this? I'm going to say this up front. We church people. So let's just say your prayer and fasting is a given. Here's why I say that. No, really, I'm serious, because we got to if prayer and fasting is hear me clearly. I was losing my mind and wanted to kill myself, y'all, and I was praying and fasting. And that doesn't mean that it was ineffective. But I really want us to, it's like as church people, we got to start expressing things beyond just our usual kind of. And again, I'm not saying it as a scold, but you know what I'm saying? What else do you do in your life? You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about. What kind of self-care practices do you have? Let's take your spiritual practices as a given. We all people in here, we in the church and stuff, so let's just take that like, yep, we know you pray, you fast, you read your Bible. But I want to know some practical things. If you was talking to somebody that wasn't in your faith, didn't believe what you believe, but you had an opportunity to just share something with them that could be pivotal and how they could take care of themselves, what would it be? Share that. We're going to go around the room. I want you guys to amend your time. I want you to be conscious because, again, I don't want to press everybody out. But because this topic is so heavy, I want to move into that space before we leave.
They couldn't get some things out of some folks without prayer and fasting.
Oh, absolutely.
They had to pray and fast, but it had to be deeper than that.
Yeah.
Now, along with what things would you do? I was sitting here thinking about what you were saying. There's drug inducement. When I had my brain surgery, they told me that there were going to be some things that were going to happen to me. They couldn't even explain what, but they know it was going to be some mood changes.
Okay.
There were going to be some things happening. You were going to be irritable. Just with the medication they had to give me to take and keep the swelling down in my head after they had went in there and tweaked me like a smart TV. And I'm serious.
It's true.
And when my father took me home, it was like the build. I had to close my eyes and hold my head because I couldn't stand riding in the car because the buildings were coming in on me like this. So, yeah, prayer and fasting. That's on definite. Praying for a sound mind, Sister Booker tell you, that's one of the key things I pray for when I start praying. But here's the thing, music. God had music to, as in the scriptures, that calm the spirit.
That's great.
Music.
Yes.
And then you have, like you said, the companions, the people that are around you that are aware of certain things. They don't go against. Even when I got into some mood swings and got irritable, and see, you have to watch not only the suicidal, but the ones that are going to be homicidal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Not only to kill themselves, but to kill you first.
That's true.
So you dealing with it.
Yeah.
In the cases of like the
Yeah.
own pastors, they
Yeah.
coming in with all of those. Remember I was talking about the monkeys?
Yes.
Yeah, the pastor get a lot of monkeys brought into his office problems.
Yeah.
So the thing is that you gotta, God's gotta give you something. And,
Yes.
and what he gave me was music.
Yes.
You know, I'm a Beethoven and Bach
It's true.
and then I can listen to Luther too. But you know what I'm saying? But I like that soothing music. I heard the pastor say he walks into the parks.
Yeah.
You got to have that exercise.
Yes.
That's what I want to use. You
Yes.
got to have an exercise.
Yes.
Because don't get me wrong, don't think that we are exempt from having those type of thoughts too.
Absolutely.
Okay?
I appreciate you sharing that because the other thing about medication, some of it, the way it works, it affects the hormone in the body. And when hormones get out of balance, even when they're treating conditions, that's why you had those, they let you know because this medication they were giving you, it was going to shift that. And because it was going to affect that, that's how they knew that you would have the mood swings and everything. Thank you for sharing that. Who is next?
I want to say that the one thing I do with Felicia, or both of us, if we're both overwhelmed from work like that, I would tell her, let's take a ride out to a park and watch water, because we love water. So she'll go down in the water, put her feet in. All I need to do is. So water. Sometimes I put water on the TV and let it splash in the speakers. So that's what we do. Or we'll go see a funny movie to make us, laugh,
Yeah.
to take our mind off stuff.
Yes. Because did you want to say something, Brother Marcus? Oh, okay. Music, yeah. Do you use music with words or without words or both? Oh. Okay. So words is the yeah. Yeah. But did you check on me? Yeah. And then she said, but did you look for me? Yes. But did you check on me? Like, did you check on me? Yeah. Yes. 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 And do you know studies show that music without words can be very healing and soothing because when you hear the words, your brain starts to process. When you don't have the words, your nervous system can just take in the sound.
I would ask question. Would it be wrong if you said I have no idea?
It's not wrong at all. Because you know what?
'Cause I have no idea.
Yeah, because you know what? Sometimes, and you know why too? It may not, well, and I don't want to tell you what you think, but sometimes what we do is so autonomic that we do it. We have things that we do, but we just do it. So we don't always have a language for what it is, but we just do it. We're used to doing it. So
It was kind of like taboo. And so therefore it was something that you seen, but you didn't articulate or you didn't question or you didn't say anything. So therefore, the practical side you would never run into. So, but
That's
the
powerful.
spiritual side is the only place that they tell you to go to, but that doesn't help when somebody's drowning and you don't have a lifeline to throw them.
wow, that's heavy. The pressure. Yeah. 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 Pastor, did you want to say something before we close out? Your self-care, Pastor. Do you got some self-care? Do you got some self-care?
Yeah, I
you
have a
practice?
design. I have a design. You can't do a lot that I do without self-care,
Okay.
or I think you would just collapse. If you don't have self-care, certain type of music that I like to listen to. Sometimes it might be I go certain places that I go. Sometimes I learn to shut down, disappear for 2 days.
Okay.
And I learn to shut down, or I learn not to deal with certain situations. But most of my self-care type of things are all different. Sometimes it's being with certain people. You know, it's being around certain people that I have in my life that I consider when I'm with them is like self-care. Sometimes I enjoy to travel. Sometimes it's simple as just putting my headphones on and listening to music or going for a ride. Sometimes just working out. You know, I like to jog and work out. Working out is very good self-care.
Great.
And so it's different. It's just different for me. I'm speaking for myself, because I think that this subject is different for everybody. How you deal with it. I've dealt with suicide. I've had people call me, tell me they want to commit suicide. I've had people commit suicide. I've found somebody who committed suicide and seen it with my own eyes. I've done, like I said, dealt with suicide on different levels. My experience with suicide is most people that I've seen to commit suicide felt like it was the end. Nothing can get whether they done it or whatever was done to them. However, they felt like nothing could get better.
Yeah.
So I try to remain a positive person, and people. That's why I try to remain, no matter what my friends call me with, I'm the person that's gonna be like, we can figure out how to get out of this.
Yeah.
We can figure out how to get out of this.
Yeah.
I'm that person, so I try to be that person. But self-care to me is very I don't compromise my self-care.
That's good.
So, you know, a lot of times people have their opinion on what you should do and what you should do, what is self-care and what is not. I know once you figure out what works for you, you can say whatever you want to say to me. Talk about me, say whatever. I need this in order to minister to you, or I need this in order to be effective in what I do, because I see a lot of sad stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I see a lot of, I think people don't realize ministry. I'm going to say this. Police officers, firemen, doctors, nurses, people who work in the hospital, pastors. Think about this. When somebody died, they calling me. At some point in time, if somebody commits suicide, they're going to call me to do the funeral.
You're right.
If somebody in the hospital sick, they going to call me. If there's some shooting going on, guess who they calling? They calling the police to try to get some protection. And then after the person is shot, they going to call the paramedics or the fire people out. Then after that, they going to call a preacher. So, I mean, that's why self care is uncompromisable to me. I have to have it, because I'm always gonna deal with something sad. As long as I'm in this business, I'm gonna have to always deal with sadness. Yeah. You know, so I love how Sister Lisa always makes the point that I am not a therapist. I tell myself every day, I should have went to school I probably should have been a therapist. I should have been a therapist. I read a lot of stuff that therapists. I have some friends that are therapists, and I ask them questions a lot about their job and try to educate, because everybody comes to me with problems anyway. Yes. That's my job, is to deal with problems. So I learned that if you don't take care of yourself, and I'm going to say this and I'm going to let you go. If you don't take care of yourself, and I have to learn in my 20 years of experience in doing this, I finally got to the point where I don't take a lot of stuff personal no more.
Amen.
So if they mad at me, I don't take stuff personal. You know, it took a long time. The first 10 years of pastoring just tore me up, because you take everything personal. And I just don't now. I'm at the point now, I've seen so much sadness, so many different things. I don't take stuff personal anymore. And because I don't take stuff personal anymore, I still want to be spiritual, though.
Yes,
and I still want to care for people.
Absolutely.
But if you take everything personal, man, it's going to tear you up. But I enjoyed everything. I love everybody. God
Thank
bless.
you so much. Thank you, guys. Our next pastor will say when our concluding session will be, but I did prepare a session on grief, because, again, I wanted to kind of close out that whole loop when we talk about mental health. So we talked about, the first week talked about stress. That's our foundation. We talked about trauma. This time we talked about suicide. We're going to take a break. Thank you, Jesus. And then when we come back, we'll talk about grief, and I will then give some additional resources. And then I got a little game that we're going to play it's called, Pick Your Self-Care. And so we're going to do that, because I want you guys to know that you got to, and if you don't have a self-care practice, I would encourage you to get one. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for this time. I appreciate it.